Hi everyone, welcome to another maths video by Maths with Sarah. So today we're going to be tackling this quite tricky little surds question. So we've been given this rather complicated equation, 6 minus root of 8, all over root 2 minus 1. And we've been asked to show that it can be written in this form, a plus b root 2. Now, don't know about you, but just the whole fact of these surds just looks quite scary to me. It looks really complicated. In actual fact, I'm gonna go through it with you, and in actual fact, there's nothing that's too complicated. It's actually not too bad once you remember how to deal with surds. So, as with all of these questions, I really encourage you to pause the video around about now. Have a go yourself, give it a try. Even if you can't fully do it, just have a think about what methods you might use, what little tricks and tips and tricks you can do. I have actually also got a Surds cheat sheet that I've been sharing on my Instagram and my Twitter. So if you need any hints, I recommend you check that out as well. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to have a little think about this. I'm going to go through it now. So, as with a lot of these questions, especially when you get to the more complicated ones, there are many different ways of doing it. So I'm going to show you just one method now. But I will mention some other methods that you could do. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just split these two up so that we've got the top and the bottom, and we'll deal with them separately to start with. So the top, we can simplify. So with surds, what we can do is we can look at factors of the surds, and then hopefully if we can find one that's a square number, we can then remove that, and that just allows us to simplify this surd slightly. So in this case, the factors of 8 would be root 4 and root of 2. And now remember, although we're looking at surds and surds tend to look a little bit scary, we can actually remember that just this is the same as square root of 4. And hopefully you all remember the square root of 4 is 2. So then we can change this to 2 root 2. So yeah, again, remember that this root 8 is the same as root of 4 times by 2, which can then be separated out into root 4 times root 2, which just makes it a little bit, if we break it down all of in each of the steps, then we can end up with this. So rather than having root 8, we've got root 2 we've got 2 root 2, and that will help us later because we'll end up with a lot of root 2s, and then we can hopefully cancel some of them out. So I'm just going to switch colour. I'm going to circle this in orange, so we know the orange bit goes at the top, and then I'm going to have a look at the bottom. So with this bottom part, the denominator of this, we have got a surd as the denominator. Now, one of the rules is that we can't have a surd as a denominator because it's an irrational number. That's not allowed. So in order to get rid of this surd as on the bottom of the fraction, we need to do something called rationalising the denominator. So what we do here, we'll take our simplified version of the numerator, and we'll leave the bottom the same for the moment. So in order to rationalise the denominator, what we want to do is multiply this. So thinking about when you're doing quadratics, if you multiply a positive and a negative half, then they're going to end up cancelling out. So that's what we're going to multiply this by now. I'm going to put each of these in brackets just to make it a little bit easier to deal with. And I'll show you what I mean. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a negative surd, but everything else is going to be exactly the same. So if you look, we've turned the surd, so we've got a positive here. We'll make this one into a negative, but we'll leave the one exactly the same. And then what we want to multiply this by, because we can't just add in extra terms without thinking about it. What we want to do is multiply this by what is essentially just 1. So we've got exactly the same on the top as we have on the bottom. So the bottom, we've actually thought about exactly how we're going to do it. We're going to write down exactly what's the same as what's on the bottom. Just switch the sign from the positive to the negative on a surd, or vice versa, depending on what your question is. Whereas the top, we don't have to think about. We just put exactly the same as would be on the bottom. So this fraction here is essentially equivalent to 1. Now we've got the slightly tricky bit of multiplying this out. So exactly the same way as you would do it with quadratics, we are going to end up with 6 times minus root 2, which is the same as minus 6 root 2. Then we're going to have minus 2 root 2 times minus root 2, which is all positive because we've got 2 negatives. So we're going to end up with plus 2 root 2 root 2. I'm going to write it all out fully at the moment, and then I'll simplify some of these bits and pieces later. Then we're going to have 6 times minus 1, which would just give us minus 6. And then lastly, we'll do minus 2 root 2 times minus 1, which again is going to flip the sign to positive, and we'll just end up with 2 root 2. Okay, I'll leave that like that for now, even though it's a complete mess, and we'll come back to it in a minute. So now on the bottom, we've got root 2 times minus root 2. So that will give us minus root 2 root 2. Again, we'll deal with this little bit in a minute. Then we've got minus 1 times minus 1, which gives us plus 1. We have got minus root 2. And then we have got minus 1 times minus root 2, which will give us plus root 2. So what you can see, if I switch colours again, is that we've got this minus root 2 plus root 2. So those two completely cancel each other out. And then we've got this minus root 2 root 2. So that's the same as minus root 2 times 2, or root of 2 times 2, which is the same as minus root 4, which root 4 is a square number, so that's just the same as minus 2, because if we square root 4, we end up with minus 2. So on this bottom half, we're going to end up with minus 2 plus 1, which will just give us minus 1 in total. Okay, now let's do exactly the same with the top. So we have got minus 6 root 2 plus 2 root 2. Now remember, this is exactly the same as if we were doing it with algebra. So this is the same as minus 6x plus 2x. So if it's easier, just take the surd away for a minute. Do the maths as needed. Put the x in instead, do the maths as needed, and then it might make it slightly easier. So here we've got minus 6x plus 2x. So that gives us minus 4x. And we'll put the root 2 back in. So minus 4 times root 2. Then we've got this plus 2 times root 2 times root 2. We've already done this bit at the bottom, so we know that root 2 times root 2 is the same as root 4, which is the same as 2. So here we've actually got just 2 times 2. So now we have got 4, so plus 4. This is the same as 2. This is obviously just 2, and we've got the times sign in there that we don't write. So this is 4 plus 4 minus 6. So that's going to give us minus 2. So lots of minus signs. But what we can actually do is we can say, well, because each of them has a minus sign, we can essentially just either remove them or say that we're dividing by minus 1, which is what we've got to do anyway. So if we divide the whole thing by minus 1, we're essentially going to end up with 4 root 2 minus 2. Now they have asked us to write this in the form a plus b root 2. Oh, sorry, I just realised I forgot to change the sign on that one. So this should be 4 root 2 plus 2. That was my mistake. So if we flip this round, we'll end up with 2 plus 4 root 2. And then it is in the exact same format as they asked us to leave it in. Now, I don't know about you, but this is an awful lot simpler than this complicated equation that we started off with. So I'm very happy that we managed to simplify it really to quite a relatively simple equation. And if I was faced with this, I'd be far happier dealing with this than I was dealing with this messy thing up here. Okay, so definitely a really challenging question. I think that surds is something that trick a lot of people. So a couple of bits of advice. So remember, with you rationalising the denominator, always times it by exactly the same as what's written there. Just flip the sign on the surd. For if we've got multiple parts of this equation, so like here where we've got the surd, but we've also got a number as well, that's when we need to rationalise the denominator. We flip the sign on the surd, everything else stays the same, and we have the same on the top as we do on the bottom, and this means that we're basically timesing it by 1, so we're not timesing it by anything. And then also my other top tip is that if the surd is catching you out and you can't remember how to deal with this, always just try putting an X in or an A or B or Y or something, and doing like thinking about how you do it using algebra, because the rules for algebra are almost identical to the rules for or very similar to the rules for surds. And my other thing is to remember, if you've got a square root of a number, like here where we've got a surd that's root 4, that is actually can just be dealt with as square root, because this is a square number, we can just square root it. So we need to remember that this symbol, although it, in this case, we're thinking about it as surds and they're irrational numbers, and we can't, or and we can't deal with the surd on its own. You know, this isn't, in a way, isn't a number. We can in fact deal with it if it's a square number, so that's fine. We can deal with this, but the root 2 is a little more difficult. Okay, so hopefully that's been helpful. Just remember, I've got my cheat sheet out, is on Twitter and Instagram, so check that out if you're having problems with surds. There's loads of little tips for dealing with the best ways of dealing with surd questions, and so loads of examples as well. I've got plenty of other videos on surds as well, so I also recommend that you check those out if you're struggling with surds. And last of all, I'd really appreciate if you would like the video and subscribe to my channel, because it's a great way of finding out about all the new videos that are coming out. Leslie, thanks very much for watching.